Every day, we're bombarded with choices, and oftentimes, our choices are not just between good and bad, but better and best. So how do you measure your days? How do you decide between better and best and redeem your time? That's coming up next as Arkansas Live starts right now. If you've been with us all week, you know that we've been talking about redeeming the time. I want to conclude this week's teaching with how to measure your time. The measure of your time. We're going to talk about some things today I think maybe many of you did not know were in the Scriptures. Let's go to Job chapter 6. You know, Job is a very interesting character. Job is a very interesting book. Most of the time, we are told Job is a story of suffering. Suffering occurred, but that's not the story of the book of Job. Job is really a story of faith. Here was a man who owned 2/3 of the known world. God had blessed him, built a hedge around about him. Even though what he said about God was wrong, God forgave him and gave him back twice of what Satan stole. Now, God did not give Satan permission. He didn't use the devil. He didn't barter using Job as the putty. God simply reminded Satan that Job lived under a covenant and that Job was a man that feared God and shunned evil. But Job was afraid. Job 3:25, it says, "The thing I greatly feared came upon me." We find out later that what he feared was that his kids were sinning. In Ecclesiastes, it says, if a serpent, if you break a hedge, a serpent will bite you. Job broke his own hedge down with fear, his fear, that his kids were sinning, so he made sacrifices for them on a regular basis. And when he broke his own hedge, Satan, the serpent, had the right to bite him or to come after him. God didn't give him permission. That's all wrong teaching. God didn't allow him. God didn't give him permission. God stood fast and stood strong for Job until the end of his sufferings, which was 9 months. And then God said, if you will cause your friends to give an offering, because Job didn't have anything, Satan stole it all, and pray for them, I will give you back twice what you've lost. So Job was a very interesting guy. He said a lot of things about God that were not true, like the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. That wasn't true about God. It's true that Job said it, but it wasn't true about God. And God corrected him at the end of the book, chapter 42, said, you said things about me that weren't right. And Job confessed, he repented. So Job was a man of sustenance. He was a man of means. He had wealth. And he got twice what he started with because he obeyed God. But Job said some things that were very interesting. He said, I know my Redeemer liveth. I know I have a daysman. I know I have an intermediator. I just don't know where they are. He was looking for Jesus before Jesus ever showed up. Now look at Job 6 and verse 11. He says, what is my strength that I should hope? And what is my end that I should prolong my life? Job wanted to know about his future. He wanted to know the measure of his days. Run with me over to Jeremiah 29:11. I didn't have this in my notes, but I remember it. Jeremiah chapter 29. And let's look at verse 11. For I know the thoughts I think towards you, saith the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end. And over in, let's see, another verse. I won't take the time to find it. There was another verse that says God is going to give you unexpected end. Well, Job says in Job 6:11, he says, what is my end that I should prolong my life? In other words, what is my future? What is the measure of my days? Now, go with me over to Psalm 39. And let's look at verse 4. Here's the psalmist, and he says, Lord, make me to know my end. You know, when you're young, you don't really think about the end. That's the furthest thing from your thinking. You don't care about the end. You want to live life now. But as you age, you begin to think about the end. Have I done what God called me to do? If you haven't, you need to redeem the time. Have I fulfilled everything that God's called me to do? God, is there something else? I do this quite often, and the Lord always reminds me, yours is a television ministry. That's what I called you to do. So I pastored for 35 years, 2 churches. Actually 37 years. If you had the first church for 2 years, then the second church, the one we started, 35 years. And that was an opportunity that God gave us to minister to people, to help people, to teach me. I learned a lot, but he said, yours is a television ministry. So when I transitioned the church over to my associate, and I asked the Lord, I said, what's my next assignment? He said, I remind you again, yours is a television ministry. So that's what I've been doing ever since. And as far as I know, I will continue to do it. But I asked the Lord this one day, and I've asked him every year. Psalm 39, verse 4. Lord, make me to know my end and the measure of my days. Underline that if you've got your Bible. The measure of my days. What it is that I may know how frail I am, or the marginal reference says, what time I have here. How much time do I have? Because I want to know if I need to redeem the time, if I've missed something, if I've wasted time. I want to redeem the time. So make me to know my end and the measure of my days. How long do I have? Some people are afraid to ask that question. He goes on and answers in verse 5, Behold, thou hast made my days as a handbreadth, and my age is as nothing before you. I am amused, and I don't want to offend anybody, but I'm amused at how we sometimes think about our birthdays. And every year I get these cards from friends and preachers and whatever, and they're going to be this year, or they're going to be this age, and they're going to be this age, and they're going to be this age, and we want to do something for them. We want to take an offering, and we want to buy them this, their churches or their ministries or their staff. And I'm thinking to myself, and I told my staff one day when I was approaching a birthday, this was several years ago, I said, now, if you want to do something for my birthday, fine. But I do not want you writing letters to my friends or people and telling them I'm coming up on this birthday and we want you to give an offering. I said, I don't want that at all. I could care less how old I am. I could care less what anybody thinks about it. I could care less about having a birthday party. Now, I'm honored that people want to honor me and so forth, and honor my position and honor the length of ministry and my age and all that. But I don't care about it. And I asked the Lord, I said, Lord, I want you to tell me why. I want you to tell me how long I have. And David went on to say, Your days are as a handbreadth, and your age is nothing before you. Wow. So I thought, well, God, if my age is as nothing before you, then it's nothing before me either. I'm not concerned about it, not worried about it. I'm not over-impressed with it. My father told me something when I left home and going out to, start my life. He told me something. I don't think I was even married at the time. No, I wasn't married. I was going into the Navy. And he said, I want to tell you something. He said, being a parent is not all it's cracked up to be. And I thought, was he saying that because of me? No, he just wanted me to know that what you've got in the future, the ideas that you have about future, about age, about marriage, about growing old, about work, about business, about family, he said you need to make sure you understand it and rethink it. It's not everything that you think that it is. Well, at 20 years old, of course, you don't have any sense. And so you need to know what the Word of God says. So I asked the Lord, I said, how much time do I have here? And he said this to me, and I wrote it in my Bible. He said, your future is bright, and the end is not in sight. I said, well, I'll take that. Your future is bright, and the end is not in sight. Now, I thought the end was in sight a few times when the devil's trying to kill me and kill my wife and kill us. He was trying to destroy us, do away with us, so we wouldn't be able to do what God called us to do. But he failed. It didn't work. He didn't kill us. And, sometimes you do stupid things that you put yourself in a precarious situation, but that's not God. And you can't even blame the devil for that. You did that to yourself. I remember years ago, I just started pastoring, and oh my goodness, and I did this for 35 years. I preached every Sunday, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, for 35 years. Then added an academy, a Bible school, a mission school, and I taught in all of those, and besides traveling and teaching. So, I don't really understand this business about teaching once a month or whatever. I taught every Sunday, three times a week for 35 years. And, that was what God called me to do. And I was worn out one day. I was laying in front of the fireplace. I'm not saying that was smart. I'm just saying that's what I did. And I was laying in front of the fireplace at home on the floor, worn out. I was exhausted. And Jeannie came in. She saw me laying there. She said, "What's wrong with you?" I said, "I'm exhausted." The phone rang. It was Charles Capps. He and I were fishing buddies and good friends. And she said, "It's Charles." I said, "Tell him I'm exhausted." And I said to the Lord, "Lord, I'm exhausted. Heal me." And the Lord said, "There's nothing to heal you of. You did that to yourself." I learned a valuable lesson. I've tried to tell that to younger ministers, but they don't want to hear it. You can derive some kind of prideful pleasure, accolades, by doing things that you do. You have to really be careful that you don't get lifted up in pride. I have friends, I talk to them on the phone every once in a while. I say, "Well, how you doing?" And one particular brother, he says, he said, "I'm just preaching myself to death." I thought, you don't really realize what you just said. You don't preach yourself to death. That's not in the Bible. That's a stupid saying. You don't want to say that. So the psalmist said, if you want to know what your end is, the end is not in sight. Your age is nothing to God. Well, of course not. He told Moses at 80 years old to be a deliverer. So your age doesn't mean anything to God. It might mean something to you. Now let's look at this. Let's just spend some time here. Job wanted to know the length of his days. We're talking about redeeming the time. Your life is measured and prolonged by the study of the Word of God. My wife and I take communion most every day. Sometimes we miss it, sometimes we do it later, but most every day we take communion because I'm convinced, and said it as I pastored and provided communion for the church. I believe if a person understands, get the revelation, and takes communion every day, they can prolong their life because you're partaking of the body and the blood of the Lord. You're creating a panoply of blessing, protection over your life. Now, listen to 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 15. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 15. Study to show yourself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. If you want to prolong your life, your life is measured and prolonged. Go to 2 Timothy chapter 3, and let's look at verse 14 through 17. Continue in the things that you've learned and have been assured of, knowing of whom you've learned them. So continue in what you've learned. Have you learned anything? The measure of your days refers to what you have accomplished according to what is expected of you. Matthew 25, 14 through 30, Jesus said that you will appear before the judgment seat of Christ, and what you want to hear is, well done, good and faithful servant. So if you continue in what you've learned, if you study to show yourself approved unto God, not unto man, you show yourself approved unto God, you'll eventually get to the point where what man thinks about you is irrelevant. It doesn't bother you or matter at all. It's what God thinks about you. The Lord said to me one time, and He said it to me since. He said, where would you rather have your accolades, your rewards? Here on this earth, among men, or there in heaven with me? Well, that wasn't a hard answer. That wasn't a hard decision. I'd rather have them with Him in heaven. I'd rather have well done, good and faithful servant, rather than, the accolades here on earth. And you have to watch yourself. You watch yourself in your heart and your spirit, as well as in your life. Let's go over to. Let's go back to Psalms. Let's see, I had my marker there. Let's go back to Psalm 90. Psalm 90. This is where we get this statement of that we've heard and seen for years. The days of our years are 80 years and 10. If by reason of strength they be 80 years, yet is their strength labor and sorrow, for is soon cut off, and we fly away. I'll fly away. Well, we get songs. We make songs about these kind of things. But many times the songs are incorrect. Keep reading with me. So teach us, this is verse 12. So teach us to number our days, that we may apply our hearts unto wisdom. Now, out of verse 10, we get that we can live 70 or 80 years. Well, Psalm 91, we'll read that in a minute, says you can live as long as you're satisfied. If you're satisfied with 70, or if you're satisfied with 80, then go ahead and die. But you don't have to die. Well, aren't our days numbered? Isn't that what that just said? No, it didn't say our days were numbered. It said, teach us to number our days. Why? To apply our hearts unto wisdom. In other words, our topic is redeem the time. Teach us to honor the time. Teach us to apply wisdom to our days. Don't just waste the day. Make sure it counts for something. He says, teach us to number our days so that we may apply our hearts unto wisdom. He didn't say our days were numbered. He said for us to number our days, meaning we are to apply wisdom to how we spend our time. And when your time is spent, it's spent. It's gone. You can't get it back. I've heard people talk about how God had to help them with giving offerings, tithes and offerings to the church, because when the plate or the bucket or the bag came by, they would put their tithe or their offering in there, and they would just watch it go down the aisle, and then it's gone. They didn't understand. They weren't giving it away. They were giving it to God. And the Bible says, what you give to the Lord, what you lend to the Lord, He will repay. Giving to the poor is like lending to the Lord, and He will repay. So every amount that my wife Jeannie and I have given to the poor, that we have helped, that we have fed, that we have clothed, that we have provided fresh water for, everything that we've done, we have lent to the Lord, and the Lord will repay. So we know that as we redeem the time, as we number our days and make sure that we do all we can do, we know that, we can live as long as we're satisfied and then fly away. Go over to Psalm 91 and verse 16. With long life will I satisfy him and show him my salvation. With long life will he satisfy me and show me his salvation. So I think in Isaiah it says the child shall live to be 100. You got to make sure you keep everything in context. The child shall be 100, live to be 100. And then in Psalm 90, and of course keep in mind this was referring to an Old Testament people that were living in another covenant. And it says 70 or 80 years. There'll be 60 years and 10. By reason of strength, 40. So 60, 70, 80. And a lot of people die in that range. And yet you don't have to if you don't want to. If God says you're not through yet, then refire. Don't retire, refire. And it says in Psalm 91, verse 16, with long life will he satisfy you. So you have three choices. You have 100, you have 60, 70, 80, and you have as long as you're satisfied. Well, how do I know when I'm satisfied? What does that mean? Go over to 2 Timothy and let's read 2 Timothy chapter 4 after the Apostle Paul. Verse 6, he says, I am now ready to be offered. Now, if you back up a few verses, he said, I'm not ready to go because I need to stay for your sake. For now he says, I am ready to be offered, and my time, the time of my departure, is at hand. Did you get that? The time of my departure is at hand. I have fought a good fight. I have finished my course. I have kept the faith. Now that's how you know if you're satisfied or not. When you can answer these three affirmative. I have fought a good fight. Have you fought a good fight? I have finished my course. Have you redeemed the time, finished what God gave you to do? And I have kept the faith. Then, and only then, can you do what Psalm 91 says, I can live as long as I'm satisfied. As long as I'm satisfied what? As long as I'm satisfied that I have fulfilled these conditions. Not until you get fed up with this world. I've been fed up with this world for decades. But it's not because you're fed up with this world that you can leave. You can't throw in the towel. You have to answer these 3 questions. Have you fought a good fight? Have you finished your course? Have you kept the faith? Then you can go on. Dr. Lester Summerall, personal friend of mine from another generation, but he and I were buddies and traveled around the world together. I preached in his church, he preached in mine. I've been in his home, he's been in mine. And he got spinal meningitis. He came back off an overseas trip. Then one of his sons, he has 3 sons, called me because he knew I'd want to know. And he said, Dad just came out of the hospital, out of a coma from spinal meningitis. And he saw us 3 boys standing around his bed. And he asked us, he said, boys, if it's okay with y'all, I'm going to be with the Lord. And he told them, he said, I've finished my course. I've kept the faith. I've run the race. I'm ready to go. And he left. He was gone. That's the way to go. The measure of your days relates to what you've accomplished according to what's expected of you. It's not necessarily how old you are. There are people that have died at 50, 60, 70, 80. It doesn't matter how old you are. Your age is as nothing to God. It's whether you have fulfilled your course, your assignment. Are you on the right course? Boy, if you're not, you better get on it right away. Make any adjustments necessary to finish your course. So I hope this has helped you redeem your time, because we don't have much time left. And it's important for you to stay in the flow, in the fight, in the gospel arena. And no matter how small or large you think your part is, everybody is valued, everybody is necessary. So thanks for joining me this week on Arkansas Live for Redeeming the Time. And remember, Jesus is Lord of Arkansas, and where you're watching too.
Send your questions, comments, and testimonies to Happy Caldwell at Post Office Box 26207, Little Rock, Arkansas 72221, or email happycaldwell@vtntv.com. Remember to follow VTN on Facebook at VTN Your Arkansas Christian Connection, and follow Happy Caldwell on Twitter at Happy_Caldwell. VTN is on Roku. Search VTN in the channel store and add us to your lineup. Today's episode is available to watch on demand at VTNTV.com and click Watch. You can also watch VTN via live stream at VTNTV.com.